Before I begin, I want you to take a moment. Take a deep breath if you could, because the story you're about to hear is not just about one man or one woman or one moment of violence. Now, when a person kills their girlfriend, science and psychology say that it is not random. They have a name for it. They call it intimate partner homicide. Now, this is one of the most extreme and devastating outcomes of a relationship which has gone fatally wrong. Now, research tells us something really unsettling. Globally, more than 1/3 of women who are murdered are killed by a former or current intimate partner. So they are not killed by strangers or by chance encounters, but by someone that they once trusted. We also know that these cases are rare. A vast majority of relationships do not become violent, but then when they do turn lethal, they are often a story of control, a story of jealousy, a story of entitlement, a story of warning signs that would appear and go unnoticed because people are blinded by whatever they want to be blinded by. Psychologists tell us these acts are rarely sudden explosions. They are more often the end point of escalating dynamics where power will replace care and then possession replaces love. In today's episode, we are going to examine a case through that lens. This is not about spectacle, neither is this going to be about the shock value, but this is about understanding how something like this happens and why it happens far more to women than it happens to men. I want you to know that this story involves real people, real laws, and consequences that cannot be undone. It is a beautiful bright morning. The sun is shining brightly, not enough to make you sweat profusely and to cause sunburns, but enough to make the sky look very clear and blue. The birds are chirping to the kindness of the morning and fluttering their wings to the morning sun which gleamed over the horizon. People prepared to go to work and to their daily hustles, which was required to put food on their table. The females amongst this group, especially the young women, were not particularly excited about going, but well, they still had to go because the day held promises. But then beneath the hustle and the bustle, something was about to threaten, if not already threatening, the peace and serenity of the country of Ghana. So a series of killings of young women were taking place, but there was no one to account for these deaths. There was no one who was accused, no one who could explain what was happening. No one. Females began to fear for their lives and tried to avoid going out as much as possible, especially in the areas these killings were taking place. But the fear, it was palpable throughout the entire country. The women, especially the young women, were afraid to go out. Now, questions rang at the back of their minds. Is it going to be our town next? Is it going to be our city next? Is it going to be our suburb next? In February of the year 2000, Joyce Barton, girlfriend of a mechanic who lived in Accra, Adenta Municipality exact, was murdered. Now, her murder opened the Pandora box for a man. Her murder opened a streamline of other cases that pointed to this man. The man convicted of strangling multiple women to death, although many questions still remain about this case. This is the case of Charles Papa Kwabena Quansah. Welcome to the Red Splash, where we explore some of Africa's most chilling crime stories and mysteries. Today, we'll take a deep dive into one of the most notorious criminal cases ever recorded in Ghanaian history, serial killings that terrorized Accra and also parts of the country. Now, let me make these few disclaimers before we proceed. There are mentions of intimate partner violence, homicide, abuse, and rape. So please prioritize your well-being and then take care of yourself. Now, today's case is also a situation where parts have remained a mystery, like what happened to the other women, both identified and unidentified, whose deaths were not accounted for even after decades. I've done my best to pile and aggregate what has been said online and even a few online theories and opinions of those who have heard about the case. So take care of yourself, stay with me through this episode, and then you can come to your own personal conclusion. This podcast is also taking on an educational, a scientific, and a psychological approach to knowing and understanding these cases. As time goes on, if there's any appropriate approach to understand cases, I will present in that manner. And finally, the statements, opinions, and information said here in this podcast are all publicly available and are not direct reflections of my personal views beliefs and opinions regarding this case. Now, with that said, if you're ready, let's get started. Criminal psychologists, law enforcement agencies, and the general public have long been interested in what motivates serial killers to commit their crimes, because most normal people could never see themselves doing the same. Another question that is asked is whether they suffer from severe mental illness that severs their contact with reality. Studies have shown that while some did undergo psychotic breaks that likely triggered their crimes, the same cannot be said for most of them. Rather, the most consistent feature among serial killers appears to be antisocial behavior. They tend to lack empathy. They show no remorse. They show no regard for what is lawful, and also no regard for what society will call normal. Studies have also shown that while some did undergo psychotic breaks that likely triggered their crimes, the same cannot be said for most of them, but rather, the most consistent feature amongst serial killers appears to be antisocial behavior. So serial killers will tend to lack empathy, they'll show no remorse or no regard for the law or what society calls normal. Another question that is usually asked is whether serial killers are psychopaths. Well, studies tell that many meet the criteria for psychopathy, but then others have been diagnosed with other things like schizophrenia, psychosis, and also personality disorder. So now when experts study serial killers, they would often look at personality, that is who they are, their development, how their childhood was, social factors, whether they are not socially awkward, whether they are accepting of people, and also the meaning behind a repeated behavior, which is actually worth taking note of. Now, this case took place between 1993 to 2000. In the late 90s, Accra was said to be a city that never slept. The night usually bustled with night raiders and commercial car horns blurred into the night. The set was a never-ending period. The night almost felt as if it was daytime. But slowly, fear was quietly taking over. Young women began to disappear, and when they were found, the scenes were gruesome. Their bodies were found. They were unalive. In the year 1993, the first death attributed to a possible serial killing appeared in police records. There was pattern in these killings. Persons targeted were women, and they were strangled to death with either a cloth or a cord or a wire. At first, these early killings were treated as individual isolated murders without connection to serial killing. There was no coordinated or specialized response by the Ghana Police Service in the initial years. Investigative techniques at the time were also quite limited. Now, on January 19, 1996, the same pattern of murder took place at Kumasi Sports Stadium, where victim Ikuasewa's body was found. Then on August 20th, 1998, one of the first widely reported murders in Accra occurred at Dansoman. Now, this marked what many people call the Accra serial murder or the Accra strangler case. Bodies of several women were found in Dansoman, in Mataheko, in Awashi, and other Accra suburbs. These killings did not stop. It continued with some bodies identified, whilst other bodies were not identified. Within this period, that is a period between 1993 to 2000, the number of women who were killed in similar patterns, which was attributed to this mystery killer, had reached over 34 plus. The police then fell under mounted pressure to solve the case, but this serial killer continued to slip out of their grasp. There was no clear suspect. A street protest in Accra demanded resignation of some senior government officials, which included the Minister of Interior at the time and also the Inspector General of Police, for what the citizens widely perceived as a failure to take the murders seriously. Now, after sustained public alarm and political attention, did the government take more decisive steps, like including the United States FBI in the year 2001 to help with investigative techniques and also profiling of the case? Now, let's focus on Charles Papa Kwabena Quansah. In 2000, after the murder of his girlfriend Joyce Boateng, Charles Papa Kwabena Quansah was arrested in his home in Adenta. Let's just call him Charles from here on. Psychologists would often classify serial killers into categories based on their motivations. I'm chipping this in. For example, lust killers will derive pleasure from the act itself, including dominance and then control. There's a hatred for the world and the society in which they live, and their hostility is going to be manifested into the murder where they would act out certain fantasies. For instance, the location of the body, evidence of torture or mutilation prior to death, then evidence of rape, and also the availability of physical evidence at the crime scene will constitute lust killing. Usually the crime is premeditated, it is planned, yet it is a crime of opportunity where in most cases, the first crime victim is usually not known to the murderer. So forensic experts would often note that many serial killers also use violence as a form of exerting absolute control over their victims to fulfill these deep-seated fantasies that they have. They also say that serial killers are often studied in relation to early exposure to violence, whether they came out of violent, abusive homes, social isolation, or previous criminal behavior. Now, after Charles was arrested, police and prison records show that he had a track record of offenses and sentences. 1. Charles had been jailed at the James Fort prison for rape in the year 1986. 2. After his release, he committed yet another rape and was jailed for 3 years in 1987 to the Insawoms prison. In the year 1996, he was imprisoned for robbery at the Insawom Medium prisons in Kumasi. Now, I tried to find more information about his early years, but unfortunately, there were no resources and sources that had much information about him. But then, whilst he was in custody for strangling his girlfriend, Joyce Barton, was when the police started attributing the deaths of other victims to him. In April of 2002, an Accra High Court began his hearing. He was alleged to have confessed to killing 8 women in Accra and also in Kumasi. An indictment and summary of evidence was prepared by the Attorney General's office whilst Charles was in custody for the murder of his girlfriend. But then before that, in the year 1996, whilst he was serving a prison term at the Insawom Medium's prison for robbery, Charles met Williams Bitter, a Lebanese who helped him secure a job in Kumasi. It was there that Charles met Kwabena, a 24-year-old hairdresser, and they became friends. Now, after a drinking spree at a bar near the Kumasi Sports Stadium, Charles strangled her to death. So on March 15, 2002, an Accra tribunal committed Charles to stand trial for the murder of Kwabena. His trial for the serial killings began on Thursday, July 11, 2002 at the High Court Criminal Session Accra, and in that same year, he was given the death penalty sentence. Now, the death penalty sentence is the maximum Ghanaian punishment, and his sentence underscored the severity of the crimes and weight of evidence that the prosecution had presented to court. After Charles was convicted for 9 murders he allegedly confessed to, he denied responsibility for the murders, claiming he was forced whilst in custody and falsely implicated with the murders. He alleged that the director of the Criminals Investigative Department, the CID, ordered his men to torture him. Now, after his conviction, deep scars were exhibited on his body, which he alleged were hot irons that the police used to compel him into admitting to the killings. He appealed his conviction, the death penalty, twice, but both attempts failed. Now, let's take a look at this. His guilty verdict, where he was given the death penalty, was pronounced after a lie detector test and claims that he confessed to the serial killings. Investigations also reveal that during his trial, the police disregarded a subpoena issued by the High Court to produce the lie detector and also the tape of confession, which were the main evidence presented against him. Now, some legal experts who commented on the issue have said that the failure to present in the court the items subpoenaed by the court to the CID should have landed a contempt of court charge. But they were all surprised when none of this happened because the CID failed to submit these items. Charles' lawyer Joseph Oblikwe, also confirmed that he had indeed caused a subpoena to be issued to compel the CID to come to court with the lie detector and also the tape of confession. But these items were never presented to court, but the trial went on regardless and landed his client the death penalty sentence. Now, this case remains one of deep complexity and lingering controversy. For many observers, the discomfort doesn't just come from the nature of the crimes itself, but the unanswered questions surrounding investigations and conclusions. And these questions, there are so many. While some people believe, and the court's verdict also implicated Charles as the perpetrator, some people have also believed that he might have been wrongfully pinned with the murders, viewing the case as one that may have been hurriedly closed due to political pressure. So now that takes us to some online discourse about this case. There are mainly two theories people pushed out for in regards to this particular story. The first group believes and are certain that Charles committed those atrocities. They believe that the evidence presented by the prosecution is enough. Plus Charles' confession and bloody shirt, amongst other things that were presented, is enough evidence that he did in fact murder the 9 victims and possibly more that he failed to confess to. The second theory is by some people who believe he was wrongfully pinned with the murders. They do support and do not argue the fact that Charles murdered his girlfriend, which led to his arrest in the first place, but there is reasonable doubt to believe that he was forced to confess to murdering the others. The reason is because the CID was under both political and public pressure, they might have needed someone to blame to calm the unrest within the country. So with Charles Quansah's previous convictions and murder of his girlfriend, he seemed like the perfect scapegoat to bear the cross. Now, this theory was supported with the point that if Charles indeed confessed to the crimes through the lie detector test, why did the CID fail to submit the tape and the lie detector used on Charles to the court after they were subpoenaed for it? Was there something worth hiding? Did the CID really have the lie detector? These are a few questions that were raised by some online individuals in regards to Charles' case. This case, truthfully, has remained a mystery that has spanned years, has left people with questions more than answers, and has left many families also grieving the deaths. Charles also, after decades, is still serving a life imprisonment. Now, that raises a question on what happened to his death penalty sentence. Now, you can read on the death penalty sentence under the Ghanaian law for more context and understanding of this capital punishment. This is where I leave you with the case of Charles Papa Kwabena Ebo Quansah. What do you think about this case? Let us know in the comment section. If there's also anything that I failed to say, or if there's anything that I left out in regards to this case, you can also let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching our very first episode of The Red Splash. I'm Adjoa Nyameche, and I'll see you in the next episode.